YouTube, welcome to this installment of the EV blog. Today I'm going to do a bit of a review on an old multimeter of mine. This meter I picked up second hand. This is quite an old girl now, but she's still quite relevant in the electronics field. This review is on the Brymen TBM811 Digital Multimeter. What makes this multimeter relevant in today's day and age is it does all the functions that are required, the microamps, milliamps, millivolts, etc. from an electronics multimeter. These meters do have a bit of issues with the screen contacts, but there are ways of fixing that. This is not my primary bench multimeter. It is more like my second or third go-to meter on the bench when it's needed. So let's have a look at this. I'm not going to go into all the AC voltage measurements, but what we're going to do is do some DC voltage measurements. So we're going to go over to volts DC, and we're going to see how this girl compares to the Fluke 87 Series 5 or 87V. Let's just bring the Fluke in next to her here. Right, I'm sure you guys all know the venerable Fluke multimeter. Very well known meter, very good all-round multimeter for electronics use, and still one of my favorites on the bench. So I'm just connecting up the power supply over here, and then I'm going to connect some power from my variable power supply onto these two meters simultaneously, so that we can do a comparison or a direct comparison between the two to see or gauge the accuracy of the Brymen. Now, bearing in mind, I do know for a fact that my Fluke meter is well calibrated. It has been recently calibrated and is well within calibration spec, actually beyond calibration spec quality. So the first thing we're going to do is we're powering up the power supply. You'll see both meters are measuring 0.008, or they're showing minus, but yeah. And then I'm just going to juice it up a little bit. Let's take it to 1 volt and see what we get. Okay, on the Fluke we're showing 1,007. On the Brymen we're showing 1,006. I can go to the high resolution mode on the Fluke, 1,0067. This one's pretty close because it is jumping between 6 and 7, so I'd say it's probably sitting at about 5 somewhere there. So as you can see, pretty close, no problems there so far. In fact, let's leave the Fluke in the high resolution mode and let's juice it up again to another commonly used voltage, 3 volts. We're showing 3,002, 3,002, 3, not much difference over there. Again, we can go to the high resolution, although it doesn't work in that setting. So as you can see, we're doing pretty good with the accuracy. I'm going to go up to 5 volts. I'm not worried about getting it exact, as I am doing a comparison. Okay, here's where the Fluke has a bit of an advantage, where it still maintains 3 decimal places after the, even in the standard res mode, whereas the Brymen 811 drops down to 2 decimal places, but still good for measuring voltages. Let's see where that Brymen kicked off. At 4. Five volts, it still hangs on, and it's before 6,000 counts, so I'd say it's a 5,000 count, 6,000 count, but anyway, let's keep going. Okay, here's where the Fluke will drop down, but again, the Fluke does have the option of still going through to the high resolution mode. So 0.693, 0.6935, but if we go to standard mode, we're getting more or less the same reading across the 2 meters on DC volts. 8.07, 9.25. I'm just giving it a spin, and wherever it lands, that's what we're doing a reference with. There we go. 10.98, 12.3839, 14.7879, still close, nicely in spec. 16.17, 16.18, 17.48. If we go to high res mode, 17.483. So yeah, we're still well within spec on the Brymen. In fact, I would be pretty happy with those sort of voltage measurements, as we're staying within 0.01 of a volt or 10 millivolts all the way. So yeah, we're going to go right up now to whatever my power supply will do on this rail without going dual rail. We've got 31.5 volts per side. I would say 31.5 volts for me. They're both showing the same reading, so I'm happy with that. The TBM811 has done admirably with that. One thing I do notice is the Fluke analog scale at the bottom is pretty stable, whereas the Brymen is giving a bit of a wiggle, a jump up and down. I'm not too sure why that is, but we will look into that a little bit. It could just be the age of this meter, I don't know. So yes, DC voltage accuracy is pretty good. I'm very happy with that. What I am going to do now is do a few AC voltage tests. So we're going to disconnect from the DC power supply, and we're going to throw a AC generator. Okay, granted it is an audio frequency generator, but at least we can control the AC signals to see what's going in and what's coming out. Again, I'm going to leave my Fluke connected, although I do have a leader analog meter connected up at the moment. One thing you will notice here is this one over here, you've got volts DC, this one you've got volts AC, whatever the case may be, but this one is volts AC will automatically select millivolts AC. This one over here, you actually have to go to millivolts and then select millivolts AC to get to where you want to be. Powering up. So I am going to output around 500 millivolts RMS. Okay, as you can see here, we got 504 point. Just wait for the generator to settle, but as you can see, they are pretty damn close together. Let's go up to 1.5 volts RMS plus minus. Okay, we're going out of scale. This is where the Fluke does work quite nicely. Now this one would actually have to switch to that. So there's a bit of a difference there. There's about nearly 10 millivolts difference, but still reasonable. I'm quite happy with that. So let's just switch her up to 5, and now we're going to go to 2.5 volts RMS or thereabout. Okay, 2.504, 2.523. We are going to around 20 millivolts difference now, as we seem to go up in the scale. So as you can see, the volts AC is a bit of a difference, but as an electronics meter we're going to be working mostly with volts DC. Now my audio generator won't go any higher than that, so I'm going to power off from there, and my next step is I'm going to do an AC mains test on this meters. Now I can't do them simultaneously with the way the bench is laid out, so what I'm going to do is I'm first going to do a reference on the Fluke, and then I'm going to swap it out, and we'll see what the Brymen shows us. So just connect up over here. Now this is direct from the socket. We have 233.78 volts. So now I'm going to connect the Brymen up alongside that. We have 232.3. They're pretty close. So that's not bad. Not bad at all. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that again. Nothing wrong with it. So yeah, as far as measuring mains voltages and stuff, I have no problem with that. It's not as accurate as the Fluke, but still well within spec. A few other things to note: if you do use your Fluke on continuity test, as such, you have a very rapid, you know what I mean? Whereas if you use this little guy over here on continuity test, it's not a like this one here, you can actually hear how it like almost activates. This one over here, you can, if you rub it, you can hear the scratching. You kind of actually have to make contact for it to work. So it's not a latching type continuity tester. Like I said, I'm not going to go into all the measurements, diodes, capacitors, etc. We all know how those go. So this is a very basic review of this meter, just to see how it performs alongside the Fluke. Just a few things to note. The Fluke backlight, you have the white light, and the Brymen, you have sort of a very dull sort of backlight, but look, it'll get the job done as needed. A few other things I do note on this Brymen is it does have an optical RS-232 port. It's got a few other little bits and bobs which are quite nice and handy, the hold functions and stuff. The one thing that I do really enjoy about the Fluke, which I don't see on the Brymen, it is on my larger Brymen TBM811, is something called the Delta. So what you can do is you can actually go to ohms resistance, contact it, and you can delta out your cables and then do an accurate resistance measurement. Like now I'm just kind of measuring my non-resistance today. So what I've done is I've deltaed out the resistance of the cables. Otherwise you would get your 0.1 ohms, 0.2 ohms depending on what cables you're using. So that's quite nice on the Fluke. I don't see that function on this meter over here. A few other things I've noted about this little meter over here, like I say, is the screen isn't as legible. Let's see if we can show you that. If you're viewing them from straight on, they're pretty much the same. But as you sort of get to a bit of an angle, you will notice that well, it's not too bad now, but in real life the screen sort of fades off a lot easier than what it does under the camera. So it's quite hard to show you that, but for all intents and purposes, I think the Brymen TBM811 could actually be a very good, decent bench meter for those of you that are getting into electronics and wanting to learn a little bit more about electronics and multimeters. I mean, sure, the Fluke is fantastic. It's a great piece of hardware. I'll never get rid of that meter. And if anything were to happen to it, I would very quickly buy another one. But at the same token, this Brymen is actually been quite a reliable meter. If I put it next to its big cousin, obviously it's not quite the same caliber, but for a small little second or third multimeter on my bench, I found it to be very handy. Also size wise, it doesn't take up the whole bench. I mean, here we have my TBM829 sitting next to it. Now the TBM829 is a real monster of a multimeter. I mean, this thing does everything the Fluke does and more. It is really a fantastic. At the same token, most of you guys won't make use of half the features of this meter over here. So it makes sense financially to start off with something like the 811. I'm not too sure if the meter is still available new, but if you do see them, which I do see from time to time in second-hand shops going, grab one of these meters, guys. These things are fantastic value for money. I have no issues with it. As far as the construction of the meter goes, let's just give you guys a quick look at it. It does come with a sort of rubberized cover. I don't quite like how this is bubbled up over the time, but look, the meter is quite old and still working, and it has been quite abused, you can see, but you can remove this cover over here. Then you have a removable tilting bail. Not the best, but I would say it is pretty stable. It's not going to fall over easily or anything like that, and it does work within the case as well. You have the port over here for connecting up a RS-232 or USB type signal cable, so you can record measurements, etc. The tilting bail does work inside the rubberized case, and the meter is not just going to fall over very easily, which is quite nice. So yeah, it's pretty stable and everything like that. As far as usability goes, no issues whatsoever. I'd say grab yourselves one of these. This meter here can cover volts, AC, volts, DC, millivolts, AC and DC, capacitance, diode test, resistance, continuity, amps AC DC, milliamps AC DC, microamps AC DC. It also has the option of measuring frequency, your hertz, which I have used for measuring PWM signals from Arduinos, etc., and that does work. Does not do duty cycle and the likes, which is unfortunate because that is something that I do like to measure from time to time. But besides that, guys, this is a good value meter. In South Africa, these meters are basically branded as Brymen or Toptronic. They are pretty decently built. The construction is quite solid. There's no creaking and crunching when you twist the casings or anything like that. It's not one of your dirt cheap meters. These guys do go for between 600 and 800 rand second hand in the second hand shops. So good value for money, guys. Anyway, that's a quick review of the Brymen TBM811 multimeter.